question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr. Speaker, every now and again in this House, a seemingly technical and innocuous bill comes before us for reasons which I would warrant are not innocuous or technical. Now, this bill was languishing at around about number 90 on the government's order paper, and yet it suddenly sprang up to number 2 today, and it is before us at the moment. So today, sir, in my brief remarks, I'm going to firstly outline what the bill contains and then go from the what to the why. Why are we debating this now, and what does it say about the government's attitude to land holdings, in particular at a time of great stress in our rural sector? But Mr. Speaker, first let's consider the substance of the bill. And as the Minister has pointed out, this is, some would say, a much overdue amendment to the basic legal framework for land tenure and land registration. It follows from an Act first written in 1952, older than most members of this House, Mr. Speaker, and one which follows from the Law Commission's report of 2010 entitled A New Land Transfer Act. Mr. Speaker, Labor is supporting this bill to Select Committee, supporting it for first reading, so that we can hear from the legal fraternity in terms of their submissions of what's right and wrong about this drafting overhaul. One of the things which seems promising, sir, is that it integrates the 1952 Act with 2 subsequent amendments, one from the standalone 1963, fine year that, Land Transfer Amendment Act and the 2002 Electronic Registration Act. And it would be helpful, all things considered, to have those 3 pieces of legislation properly integrated into one single piece of law. As the Minister has said, this bill does retain the essence of the Torrens system, where title to land is acquired by registration. It's, as far as possible, secure and indefeasible. One's home is one's castle. One's title is the anchor of one's home. And a purchaser should not need to go behind the register to investigate the root of the title. That is, the title itself is gold-plated. That is also a strong tenet of tenure, so to speak. Mr. Speaker, the bill does make 2 significant changes which the Select Committee is going to need to consider carefully. The first is in relation to indefeasibility, where the bill introduces a limited judicial discretion to order the alteration of the register in situations where immediate indefeasibility would result in what is termed a manifest injustice. So it's introducing a little more flexibility into the law, provided that clear grounds can be established that to proceed without change would be manifestly unjust, and that's useful in situations where an unexpected complication's arisen between a mortgagee and a mortgagor. Sometimes that results from the passage of life and into an estate. Mr. Speaker, the second significant change to the status quo is in respect of compensation. The bill retains the state compensation that currently operates, but it makes a few modifications. Compensation will be available for loss through registrar's error, the operation of the land registration system, and having acted in reliance on a guaranteed search, but those guaranteed search periods are shortened. That is, if a citizen acts in reliance on the statute and on the operation of the registry and for some unforeseen reason is thwarted and their title is defeased, then they may, in certain limited circumstances, be entitled to compensation, Mr. Speaker. The bill clarifies that the amount of compensation payable where the claimant has been deprived of an estate or interest of land is the value of that estate or interest, so it rules out by implication pecuniary damages. And for mortgagees, compensation only extends to the value of the security and excludes any amount beyond that. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of measures in the bill which the Select Committee will wish to hold to its stated purpose of enhancing clarity and certainty. provisions clarifying the registered title may be limited by overriding interests in other statutes, and we'll come on to some examples of that that are very important. Provisions clarifying the nature and scope of the registrar's powers of correction, removing inconsistencies around existing legislation that protects administrators from some kinds of personal liability but not others, and limiting the effect and use of covenants in gross for consistency with the original policy intent. Sir, much of that goes to what we would call good housekeeping of the law. It goes to the periodic updating of a legislative framework, in part because of the 2010 review. But that's where, sir, I think the mystery starts. That's a 2010 review which has slowly wound its way through the system and was languishing well down the government's order paper until today, where it leapt to the government's highest priority bar one. Now, none of us would argue with the previous priority, the Kermadec Sanctuary, and its wonderful and bipartisan innovation. But this one's a little bit of a mystery. It's been around for years. It's seemingly administrative and innocuous. Why now? Well, here I think, sir, is the reality. Media over the last week has been focused on New Zealand's growing rural land crisis. And it is a land crisis. It is driven by a sustained collapse in dairy markets, and it has resulted in what the Reserve Bank and Dairy New Zealand, this is their publication, the Reserve Bank Bulletin of December 2015, forecast in their worst case scenario, which was a payout sustained for 2 years of $4 per kilogram of milk solids for 2 years and then rising. We are worse than that worst case scenario now at $3.90, and it forecast in this document a 40% decline in rural land values. A 40%. And even on the mid-case scenario where prices are rising back to $6, and that seems fanciful on today's money, a 25% decline in land values. So these are the technocrats, these are the economists. This is a matter which is not political, this analysis, but the implications start to get political, and I don't think the government wanted a debate on this bill in 3 or 4 weeks or 2 months' time, because this situation is rising to be one of the most severe crises, economic crises New Zealand has faced. If land values collapse 40%, as the Reserve Bank is predicting, what is going to happen to the incomes of farmers? What is going to happen to rural towns and communities? What is going to happen to the broader New Zealand economy? Mr. Speaker, National is arrogant and out of touch. They are not being straight with New Zealanders about the magnitude of this challenge. Mr. Speaker, if all of those banks foreclose on those farms and we see a 40% collapse in farm prices, the knock-on effects will be huge. And I think we all know where the pressures will be. There's National caught between two core constituencies, the big banks on the one hand and the dairy farmers on the other. Something's going to have to give. Do you know what it is? And this is where this bill comes in. It'll be fire sales overseas, sir. That is why they want this legislation on the way through, because they are preparing for a massive swathe of fire sales of New Zealand farmland to overseas buyer. Now, iwi are not that stupid. Iwi do not sell their land overseas. We should be very vigilant, and we are saying today in this debate that the Labour opposition is going to be extremely vigilant about this issue, because who takes the haircut? Is it going to be the banks that have made, in technical terms, a freaking killing of profit on the lending they've done to both the rural sector and residential urban real estate? Are they going to take the haircut? Is it going to be the farming families, the share milkers and the farmers who get foreclosed on? Are they going to take the haircut? Is it going to be rural New Zealand communities? Are they going to take the haircut when this bill facilitates the fire sale of New Zealand farmland? And what is the government doing about it? You know, if this was a rugby game, it would be a brawl, and the referee just abdicated the field. They're not even playing the role of a decent touch judge. That's got Mr. Woodhouse's attention because he can understand football, even if he can't understand immigration. Mr. Speaker, they are out of the game. That's why New Zealanders need a government that can take a long-term view of land sales with secure tenure and good strategy and protect it for future generations.